Welcome to the Deep Dive, brought to you by All About U.S. Life News. We're so glad you could join us today.
It's good to be here.
We are diving into a really interesting stack of recent reports. They blend personal histories, high-level political spending.
And most importantly, those practical financial issues.
Exactly. The things that genuinely affect your budget every single month. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We've compiled a lot of articles and reports from all over.
All centered on public figures and current events.
Right. And we're here to be your filter. We want to pull out the clear, simple, and, reliable information from all that noise and really focus on what matters in your daily life.
It's about finding the signal in the noise.
That's a great way to put it. And to kick things off, let's start with a question that really guides this whole dive. How much of a public figure's personal story, the polished version they show the world, can we truly trust?
A very important question.
And to help guide us through all this material, I'm joined by our expert analyst. Lawyer Min Ha is a lawyer and legal expert. Welcome.
Thank you. I think it's vital we help our listeners navigate these complex stories and, understand the bigger picture.
I couldn't agree more. And before we really jump into the details, if you could just take a moment right now, we ask you to please press, like, share, and subscribe to the channel All About U.S. Life News.
Your support really does help us keep providing these focused discussions.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this. We're going to start with some reported biographical details about Donald and Melania Trump. Specifically, reports about their first meeting back in 1998.
Right. The narrative that was shared publicly for years was very specific about the setting.
So what did that story say?
Well, according to interviews and her own accounts, Melania reportedly described the place where they met as and I'm quoting here, glamorous place where editors and models were all mingling.
Okay, so that paints a picture. High fashion, high society.
It certainly does, but this is where the more recent reports we've seen suggest, well, a pretty big contrast.
A contrast with that description. What do the sources say the place was actually like?
This is where that image management really comes into focus. Other reports about the venue, which was the Kit Kat Club in Manhattan, described it in much starker terms.
How so?
Some articles called it a grimy club. And that reported contrast, between a glamorous place and a grimy club, that really is the heart of the difference between a curated story and the reported reality journalists found.
That is a striking difference. It does suggest a deliberate effort to control the narrative right from the start.
Yeah.
And who reportedly brought them together. That adds another layer, doesn't it?
It does. Recent coverage points to a man named Paolo Zampoli. The sources say Zampoli ran modeling agencies, and his business was focused on bringing younger women, often from Eastern Europe, to the United States.
And they were brought here for a specific purpose.
Reportedly, yes. They were brought to parties that were designed for them to meet powerful, wealthy men.
And the same person, Zampoli, he later had a position in the administration.
That's correct. Biographers have indicated Zampoli was appointed a top government official by Donald Trump. It does raise questions about how these networks of personal connections and political favors can operate.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on from their meeting, the reports also point out some discrepancies in Melania's reported educational history.
Yes, her official public biography, the one that was shared with the media, claims she earned a university degree in design and architecture back in Slovenia.
And for someone in public life, education is a pretty key part of their image.
It's a pillar of their story. But other documented sources, they tell a different story about her time in college.
What do they say?
Well, biographers and investigative reporters indicate that she actually dropped out of college after just her freshman year.
So claiming a full university degree versus leaving after the first year, that's a pretty wide gap.
It is, and it leaves us, the audience, trying to figure out which version is the accurate one.
We also saw reports detailing her immigration path. The sources mention her initial visa, which sometimes comes up in political debates.
She reportedly received what's often called an Einstein visa.
Can you just briefly explain what that is for our listeners?
Of course. It's a special visa for people who are designated as having extraordinary talent in a field arts, sciences, business. She later got full citizenship after marrying Donald Trump.
And then after she became a citizen, that also relates to a big debate in Washington.
That's right. Reports say she then used the chain migration process to bring her family to the United States.
And chain migration is just the term for when new citizens can sponsor their extended family members to come to the U.S.
Exactly. And that specific process has been a major point of political debate for many years.
One last thing on this topic before we move on. There's another reported association from the past that's gotten a lot of media attention.
Yes. Recent coverage points to photos that are circulating of Donald Trump, Melania, Jeffrey Epstein, and Ghislaine Maxwell together at parties. We're just presenting that information as has been reported by the sources.
Right, allowing the listener to consider the implications of those past connections. Okay, let's pivot now from personal history to something with a much more direct practical impact.
The financial side of things.
Yes, political spending, and most importantly, how those costs can trickle down to your household budget. This is critical.
It really connects the dots between the big political picture and the costs affecting the average American home.
So let's start with that political spending. What did the sources report about how certain political funds were used for personal services?
Well, reports showed that political action committees, PACs, those fundraising committees that were connected to Donald Trump, reportedly paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for Melania's fashion stylists and makeup artists.
And this was happening even while he was out of office.
That's right. It's a significant amount of political donations going toward personal image-related services.
What's the justification for that kind of spending?
Well, the Paceys generally argue that maintaining the public image of a political family is important for fundraising and political activity. They classify it as a legitimate political expense.
But it feels like a major gray area.
It is. It's constantly under scrutiny because it really blurs that line between campaign spending and just funding a personal lifestyle.
That reported spending is just astonishing. But now let's connect this to the detail we promised our audience. The sharp rise in household electricity costs. This affects everyone listening.
And it's a real practical pain point. According to analysis from the Energy Information Administration, household electricity prices have reportedly gone up by 13% since Donald Trump took office.
13%. That's a huge jump, especially for seniors on a fixed income. And analysts are saying this trend isn't slowing down.
It's not.
So why?
What are the reported reasons behind this sharp increase in our monthly utility bills?
The sources point to a couple of main factors. It's growing demand and, at the same time, a lot of pressure on the existing supply.
What's causing that? First, there are mounting climate pressures. Extreme weather challenges our older power grids, and that leads to very costly upgrades. Second, and this is a massive factor, is the explosive growth of energy-hungry data centers.
We're talking about the buildings that power artificial intelligence, cloud computing, all of that new technology.
Precisely. These data centers need just staggering amounts of power, sometimes the equivalent of a small city, and huge amounts of water, too. The demand is just outpacing the available supply.
So the utility companies need to build expensive new infrastructure like huge transmission lines or new power plants. How does that cost end up on my individual electric bill?
This is the key part that affects every single consumer.
Yeah.
Utilities have to go to state regulators and get approval for these big, expensive projects.
Okay.
Once those regulators approve the spending, the utility is allowed to get that money back. And they get it back from you.
Directly through our bills.
Exactly. The cost is passed directly to consumers through higher monthly charges. You'll see it as a line item on your bill, maybe transmission cost adjustment or something like that. So the cost of this massive tech expansion becomes the cost of your electric bill.
And that explains the local reactions we're seeing. What are communities reportedly doing about this?
We're seeing people connect politics directly to their wallets. Sources report citizen pressure in places like Arizona and Indiana actually forced big tech companies to abandon some data center plans.
Because of the anticipated strain on resources and costs.
Exactly. And in states like Georgia and Virginia, voters are reportedly connecting the dots between political decisions, like fast-tracking these data centers, and their skyrocketing utility bills.
That's where national policy stops being abstract and hits home. That's powerful. Okay, let's shift to our next segment, which really highlights a contrast between major global crises and the reported priorities of Donald Trump.
Yes, if you look at the broader picture of where a leader's focus is, the sources do show a pretty striking contrast. For example, recent reporting noted Donald Trump's silence on that horrific terrorist attack at Bondi Beach in Australia.
The one that targeted Jewish groups and resulted in 12 deaths?
That's the one. And there was also reported silence after a domestic tragedy, too.
Right. He reportedly offered no further comment on the school shooting at Brown University, and this was after he had already posted false information that the shooter was in custody.
Both events that got huge international attention.
Yet, during the same sensitive time frame, his reported focus seemed to be somewhere else entirely. What do the sources say his priorities were?
The Wall Street Journal reported on a recent interview they did with him. And the reporter noted that the former president reportedly interrupted their conversation multiple times.
To take phone calls.
Yes, to take calls discussing specific plans about one thing: taking over Washington, D.C.'s public golf courses and turning them into Trump-branded golf courses.
So, while major crises were unfolding, his reported priority was not public reassurance, but business interests tied to his brand.
That's what the report suggests, that branding and business expansion remain a constant priority, regardless of what else is happening.
And there's another reported action that relates to public priorities, this one about accessibility.
That's right. Sources reported on a controversy around sign language services at his events. The Department of Justice reportedly has documents stating that Donald Trump has banned sign language interpreters from his events.
And what was the reported reason for that ban?
The reason given, according to those documents, was that using interpreters intrudes on Trump's ability to control his image.
So the need to control the visual presentation outweighed the need for communication accessibility.
That's the conflict. And the deaf community, which relies on these services to understand what's being said, has expressed deep concern. It raises a really fundamental question about public service.
It really does. Should image control ever take precedence over full accessibility? That's a question we should all think about. Okay, let's move into our final segment. This one looks at reported instances of communication challenges under public scrutiny.
And this brings us back to Melania Trump and a report about a public reading.
Yes, sources reported on an incident where she was scrutinized and in some places reportedly mocked after struggling to read a Christmas book to a group of children.
It was a very high-profile event.
And I want to say, regardless of anyone's politics, we should remember that English is a very hard language to master, especially when you're reading complex text with cameras on you. That struggle is understandable.
It's completely understandable. But the reports did highlight just how tricky the text she was reading actually was.
The source material included the text. It had lines like, "Does he wear night vision goggles that make everyone green?"
Or heat vision goggles because he might like red better.
Right. I mean, that's a communication challenge for anyone trying to deliver a smooth reading.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it just brings up that whole issue of public scrutiny when someone's communication isn't absolutely perfect.
This communication scrutiny gets more complicated, though, when we remember the reported history of plagiarism.
It's unavoidable in these reports. They frequently remind the public of that incident at the Republican National Convention, where Melania's speech reportedly ripped off word for word a part of Michelle Obama's 2008 speech.
Let's just go over those quotes slowly, because they show how closely the wording reportedly matched.
Okay, so Michelle Obama's 2008 speech included, "You work hard for what you want, and your word is your bond." And the idea to treat people with respect, with dignity and respect.
And Melania's speech included almost the exact same phrases.
Yes. The reported phrases were, "You work hard for what you want, your word is your bond, that you do what you say you're going to do, and treat people with respect, with dignity and respect."
That word-for-word repetition is what caused such a strong reaction at the time.
And it continues to be mentioned in reports about public scrutiny and authenticity. It all ties back to that central theme of image management versus verifiable facts.
So we've covered a lot today. Personal history, passy spending, rising electric bills, communication issues. What is this so what here? How do all these threads connect for our listeners?
Well, what's most fascinating is how public figures manage their image and use significant resources, including political money, to maintain that image. And at the same time, they're involved in policy decisions that have immediate and sometimes painful financial consequences for the average person.
So the actions of leaders always have real-world consequences.
Always. Whether they're focused on personal branding or policy choices like energy regulation. And sometimes those consequences are a direct hit to your monthly budget, like that reported 13% rise in electricity costs. We have to look beyond the spectacle to see the actual impact.
That's a clear and powerful way to put it. For our final thought, I want to leave you, our listeners, with this to think about. When we analyze all these political actions and personal histories in the news, we should always pause and ask ourselves two simple questions.
What are they?
First, which of these reported details truly affect my family and my community, like the cost of keeping the lights on? And second, which details are simply noise, maybe designed to distract us from those practical realities?
Focusing on what hits closest to home.
Exactly. Keep focusing on those practical details. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. And remember, please, we ask you explicitly to like, share, and subscribe to the channel all about U.S. Life News. We'll see you next time.